Welcome to Ulua. You live, you work, you art.
Hi, this is Carol from Ulua, and I was seeing the other day an interview that somebody was doing. I don't know the name of the interviewer, but the interviewee, which is the most important one, I think, was Alain de Botton. And I was hearing him say, talking about emotions and how having the right words to express those emotions can really help us to understand ourselves, to be able to cope with those emotions, and to really feel and be able to express as exactly or as more accurately as possible. And I had to stop the podcast because it had me thinking. If, for example, having more words, more vocabulary, just by just having the words to express the things you are feeling, is actually better. And in that case, it came to mind, for example, what about poets? Because poets in general, they have more vocabulary than any one of us regarding the language, and they have so much sensitivity in them, and they are able to express with different words things they are feeling or things they are imagining, things they are sensing. And so I thought maybe poets feel more if they have the right words to express what they are feeling. Could be the other way around. I don't know, I just want to share that question with you actually. And at the same time, I thought, well, maybe they have the ways of expressing what they are sensing in the moment, what they are feeling, and maybe build better emotions or handling them better, managing them better. But maybe not, because at the same time, I was reminded of a friend that she used to love the tormented artists, the ones that, for example, Poe, Tolstoy, I don't know, Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, Franz Kafka, even Bukowski. I think he was an alcoholic at some time. Vincent van Gogh. Well, we have so many tormented artists that we think that they were the most creative ones, and they were innovative, and they were great, and that kind of thing. So I thought, especially regarding writers, maybe they do have the words, and then why were they still tormented, where they were not feeling great if they did have the words to express themselves? So I think that's maybe not sufficient to having the words to express what you are feeling. Maybe you have to do some extra work also to be able to manage your emotions well, right? Or the things you're sensing. And so I started looking for more information about that, and I found several documents. Some of them were research, some of them were some essays and that kind of thing. And I will spoil it in case you don't want to continue watching this. Actually, there are some keys of the things that could be happening inside a person, but there is no specific trait that you can find. This person is creative because they are, I would call it crazy, but I don't know, they have mental issues, or they are creative because they were familiars of people who had mental illnesses. And there's nothing conclusive yet. So I will be sharing with you some of these things, and we can talk more about it. And before I continue, I want to share with you what is the difference between correlation and causation. Maybe you already know it, so you can skip this part. But I have seen so many, here's my cat, so many articles and books, even essays, research, and you name it, YouTube videos, etc., that are basing their information on correlation, which is what's the difference with causation. Causation, I will start with causation. Causation is when something happens, this other thing happens. So you can relate those things you want to know about by knowing that one causes the other. And I will give you example later. But correlation are things that are happening at the same time that may or may not be related. In general, what I've seen is they are never related. In my experience, almost none are related. So as I'm not a researcher and I won't continue researching things, I just say that correlations for me are not really important, right? And for example, here is an example that I found in the internet. I found it's really interesting. And it says about the ice cream and the sunburn scenario. For example, we can have data about ice cream sales and sunburn, right? So we can have parallel data, for example, in tables or in databases and that kind of thing, and we can find the correlation, for example, between the moments that ice cream sales are high, people get more sunburn. So this is correlation. Do sunburns happen because people buy ice cream, or do people buy ice cream because they get sunburn? We cannot actually say. There's like two walls there. There's nothing to connect them in the middle. However, if we were to express causation, for example, we could say, so we could find, in this case, we have two walls here, and we can say, okay, what causes the ice cream is selling high in these times, and what causes that people get sunburn? Oh, it might be the weather, right? So there's another factor that's introduced as the cause of these two things, but they are not related between each other per se, just by existing. So correlations are, for me, are as I said, as I'm not, maybe if there's causation for them both to be correlated, as in this case, that you can say, okay, the weather, because it's too hot and people get sunburn, and at the time it's too hot and people buy too many ice creams. But in general, correlation and causation is just almost every time I discard them. But because as I say, I'm not a researcher, and I don't know if I could get to the bottom of the things. Maybe I can sometimes, but in generally speaking, no. So be careful about that when you read anything. Say if they say it correlates, and also beware of where are this data or this idea coming, because sometimes people say, okay, ice cream and sunburns are caused by the same thing, in this case weather. That's correct, but in some other cases they just take as a causation, or as this is true, that these two things that are just correlated and they are not actually they don't have a relation of causation. So be careful of that, because I've seen it many times that people say, oh, this happens, but it's actually a correlation and it has nothing to do with the main topic. So anyways, I hope I made myself clear about this, and I really think that if you want to enlarge your mind palace, or if you want to become a better thinker, you have to have at least this one tool in your toolkit, because it's super important for you to understand that what is a correlation and what is a causation. And if you take two random databases with information from different parts or completely unrelated in general, I'm 100% sure that I don't know if you're 100%, but you will find a correlation between things, because it could happen at the same time, but it doesn't mean that one causes the other. I've seen, for example, somebody found that I don't remember if it was a cosmetic, and the other data which was correlated was the death of children. So it was totally unrelated, actually, but this correlation makes you think that there's something going on between these data, which isn't actually. So be careful with that. Anyways, going back to what we were talking. So maybe, yes, if you have more ways to express the things you're feeling, and you're expressing them, and you're putting yourself in charge of handling those feelings, emotions, the things you're going through, or have went through, and now you're trying to understand them and give a space for them to be healed. Yeah, in those cases, I think that having the particular words for the things you have gone through are really good, because you can really understand and put a name, like putting a pin on the things that happened to you and make your own map of the situation. And I think it's really, really important. And it was surprising because if you remember, we talked a lot about languages, and in the episode called Second Language, Second You. But, and I talked a lot about, for example, like how emotional our emotions are more like expressed, and also we could say triggered in our native language, because it is the first one we learn, and the first one we talk with the people around us, and where, for example, at home, or are the places where our emotions are like more happen to go out, I could say. And I really thought that Spanish was one of the languages that had this way of expressing most emotions, but actually it happens that it's not like that. Even German, that I don't know anything about German, but I thought it didn't have that many emotions. Not because they didn't have emotions. Sorry, I didn't mean like that. I mean, and actually, they are the ones that have Japanese and German the most words to express more feelings even than in Spanish. For example, in German they have, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's Schadenfreude, something like that, which is a pleasure derived from others' one's misfortune. It's something like, and I don't know exactly because I don't know any German, but what I can imagine is that you can have some kind of fun of looking at, I don't know, other people having some problems. I don't know, that's what I understand. Maybe, please, somebody, if you know German, if you can make it more clear. And also I've heard that they have Sehnsucht or something like that, which is a deep longing. which I didn't know actually, those two words, so I took notes on them. And we don't have anything like that in Spanish. So I found that really interesting, because in generally, again, I'm generalizing, and we are normally associating these Latin languages to be more emotional, right? And the same happens with Japanese. They have a concept. Again, I don't know any Japanese either, so I may be mispronouncing this. It's like something amai or something like that. Amai? I don't know. It's the feeling of dependence and indulgence, which is quite deep, I think, right? And and so yeah, that's one little word to express so many things, and I found that really interesting. Again, in my ignorance, I thought Spanish had the most words to express emotion, but apparently we have much more adjectives than than emotional words, or words for emotions. Well, I have some others, but I won't be bothering you with that. I wrote about some, but I can mention the languages. Portuguese. Well, Portuguese is kind of similar to Spanish in some way. Russian. I don't know nothing about Russian, but apparently they have more like more words to express feelings. Arabic also. And this is interesting because, as I have mentioned, I started learning Arabic, but now I have forgotten about everything. But they have many words relating to love and lovers and that kind of thing. So most of the emotions come from love, and different words for saying love or lovely things about love. Sanskrit and Hindi also, and well, yeah, there are many languages. I didn't know actually that they have so many words to express. Well, actually, about Sanskrit, I know they have an amazing number of words to express different things that I don't think we could ever imagine. I think I read somewhere that, for example, for one word that we have in English, for example, maybe there are like 500 in Sanskrit. I don't know if that's correct or not, or if it was about nouns, or if it was about adjectives. I don't know, but it was really interesting, and the ratio was like 500, something like that. Yes, I remember the 500, but I don't know exactly why. But I know there are so many words in Sanskrit, and it's really difficult to translate it into English or into any other language. So, well, I went again off topic, but I wanted for you to know about that, because I found that interesting. So, coming back again, it's like restarting the topic. We were talking about the tormented artists, because I thought, and it came to mind when Alain Botton said that having more, and I hope I'm not misinterpreting him, but I don't think, he said having more words to express what you are feeling. For example, when you go, he gave this example, when you go to a psychologist, for example, and they say, you start talking about the things that have happened in your life, and they mention some word, and they again, this is not his example, but it is in my mind how that translated it. It's like putting a pin, as I said, in a map, and I say, oh, this is right here. I think with this particular word, and you can understand your feeling, your situation, your emotions at the time, and maybe your behavior, and how you can in the future, if you want, change that. But you have a pin there where you can go back and see the things that you need reflection on, or that you can evolve. And I really find that super interesting. But then immediately came to mind this tormented artist, and I also remember Alejandra Pizarnik, which is one of the, just to name a woman from Argentina. She was an amazing poet, and she had so many mental problems and everything. And I know other more that are coming to mind. But if she had so many words in her, as her ability to express those feelings and everything that was going on in her life in such a beautiful way, right? Why is that she ended up in badly? And so that was, I thought maybe it's not enough to just have the beautiful, or maybe not always beautiful, but having those words is not sufficient enough for you to be able to put these pins, or maybe it's just for putting these pins, but you have to do the work later, and you have to really try to trace this map and really understand what's going on, even more in more depth than just words you are using. Because you can also write, for example, a journal and say, oh, this happens to me and that and that and that today, and just leave it there and forget about it and really not work on yourself. Does that make any sense? And after that, I started looking for some tormented artists, as I was saying. And one of these research says that there is actually no way, or at least in this research, there was no conclusion about if having, for example, a mental illness, or if having some disorders could actually make you more creative. And this reminded me, because I had a friend in the past, and she was so in love with, in particular, Allan Poe and Van Gogh and some others that suffered so many things, and maybe they were alcoholic, they have complicated lives, mental illnesses and whatnot. And I always find that she was romanticizing this idea of the crazy creative one, and how their lives were so miserable, and from out this misery is where they had the most creative ideas, and you have to suffer to be an artist. That was actually something she really believed in, having to suffer in order to be an artist. And I don't think that's the case. So when I remember that, I started looking for things to know if there is something that actually says, okay, you have to have certain disorder in order to be a better artist. And I found out other research and things that said that, for example, that when this artist, this renowned artist, for example, like, I don't know, Monk, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, I think it's Monk, and I don't know, Toulouse-Lautrec, who else? Van Gogh, one of the most known. Their most renowned work, or the most beautiful, or maybe the most artistic expression, the better artistic expression they have, their best, we could say, were actually done on periods where they were fully aware, and maybe their mental disorder was a little bit lessened. So when they were more calm, or they were, I don't know, healthy, I'm trying to find the right words here. That's when they did the best of their work. So it's not that you have to be suffering and feeling awful in order to be creative. Actually, it was the opposite way. And there was something really interesting that I also found, that some people, or many people that have gone to, or that are artists, why are generally artists related to creativity, is because, sorry, not artists, I mean mental illnesses related to creativity, is because, yes, it depends, of course, on the spectrum, because if you are on the lesser, or the initial spectrum, we could say maybe you have some traits that, for example, being more sensitive, being more open to the world, that kind of thing, that can help you, but just very little in order to be more creative. But if you are in a more developed state of the illness, or the disease that you're having is more developed, then your creativity will actually plummet. So it's not something that you can actually, I don't know if measure is a thing, because it can be measured, but it's, I don't know, it's something that it's so volatile, we could say. So even though you may have some traits in order to be more creative at the early stages of the development of the illness, for example, in the long run, that's what I was looking for, in the long run, it won't be really good for you or for your creativity. And while I was doing some research, and I was talking to my partner, and he showed me, I will leave the photo here by my side. He was telling me about how if your brain, because we are creative because it's a function that we have in our brain, when our brain starts to decay or degrade, it also does our creativity. And he showed me this picture about an artist who drew self-portraits, and he had Alzheimer's. So from he was young to his last days, it was like, I will leave it here. I don't remember right now because I don't have it in front of my eyes. But it was really super clear how his mind was degrading along all this time. And even though he was an artist, it was really interesting to see how his perception or his senses were also diminished along the time with this horrible mental illness, which is Alzheimer's. So yeah, I think we have romanticized too much this of the tormented artist, and how an artist should be in order to be the best, and that kind of thing. I don't believe tormented artists or at least as an artist, I don't want to be tormented because it's not nice. And also, and I have also known this friend I was mentioning about, this person, and several others, that they think they have to be eccentric and they have to be, and hey, I am not saying you don't have to be these kind of things, but because I think when you think differently, maybe you have some quirk or weirdness. I don't know. Somehow it happens because it's if it's part of who you are, that's perfect. But I'm talking more about the trying to impose certain features or certain things upon yourself. And you don't have to be the super eccentric one to be an artist if you don't want to, or if it is not part of yourself, right? If you just, I don't know, find pleasure in that, you do you. But I mean, it's not something that it's intrinsic of an artist. And actually, this thing, the tormented artist, remember that we talked about tropes. It's used a lot for movies and books and stories in general, because it gives you this trope, like it's a quick way to get into your emotions and to appeal into your senses if you are reading a book, or if you are looking at a movie, or that kind of thing. So just know about that, because artists are people, and people have so many complexities in their lives, and they can be so different one from another. And I also believe that in general, because there's some kind of truth in this, that most of the artists, or many artists, have mental illnesses and that kind of thing. And I think it's not because they are creative and that lead them to be to have these illnesses or these diseases or that kind of thing. But I think that maybe when you, I don't know, I'm thinking about this nowadays, when you have to be super productive and you have to be, we will talk about that in some other episode. You have to be super productive. You have to keep up with the things that are going on. You have to work. And I've seen creatives working in an office, or in a working in a working environment, and I've seen sometimes I've seen them sometimes not suffering, but yeah, being pushed to the limits. And you have to have some time in order to be creative, but they are just they are feeling the pressure to just have something done by the end of the day, by the end of the week, and that kind of thing. And when I talk to them, what I see about artists is, again, I'm an artist too, and when I work and I do my business office things, I'm super, super, super productive. So I kind of like, I can switch. But I understand that not everyone is the same, and I'm not saying I'm best than anyone else, because I also understand that I have had some burnouts when I only work on, let's call it, office things. And you need to have some time in order to be really creative. And if they don't have this opportunity outside work, most of them have, but sometimes they don't, because they, I don't know, they are not well paid, and they have to maybe have 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, and that can lead to being stressed, to mental illnesses. They are more prone to get something else because they are under too much pressure and that kind of thing. And I can understand that thing that can happen. And maybe I think that could be why so many artists end up having these problems. And on the other hand, I have seen people with some mental issues that they sometimes turn to art as a therapeutic work, right? So they feel more calm and that kind of thing. So maybe art can be for them like something to be at peace sometimes, and maybe they can become famous. Why not? But so there could be so many factors about this thing, not specifically that creativity is super related to mental illnesses. I don't know if I made myself clear with that. And also take into account that many people, also that's another thing, maybe they have been creative all their life and they have worked in a profession, because artists seem not to be professional enough for the business world. And after they have retired, for example, it came to mind the case of Miro. Kandinsky. He was a surgeon, I think. He was in the medic profession, and he started drawing and painting and doing things. And I wonder if he had some mental illness. Maybe he would consider, oh, he's creative because he has a mental illness, but actually he started as a retired person at a certain age. So there are so many factors here that we sometimes turn to say that creativity causes mental illnesses, or the mental illnesses are caused because you're too creative and that kind of thing, but I'm not sure at all. And as I said before, these people that have actually been researching it in a scientific way, they have found no conclusion at all. So yeah. Anyways, I think that this was just fascinating to understand why, or make myself this question, and then started wittering. I don't know. I would like for you to tell me what you think about the tormented artist, if you have to be a tormented artist in order to be a proper artist, or if you, in order to be creative, you have to have some mental issue, or you have to be eccentric at least, or if you have to be X, Y, Z. I don't know. I don't think anything of that is true. I mean, you don't have to be a certain way in order to be creative, because that's a capacity that we have in all of us, and that's what I think. And like anything else, you have to practice and practice and practice and be willing to practice more in order to be creative, and again, with your senses, trying to express yourself better, understand your emotions. I think like part of growing, if you are on this in your development, or if you want to develop yourself more, you can have this how to be more creative as a goal, as an objective, or something that you might want to go into. Anyways, I hope this has somehow been helpful for you. this episode was mostly about these ideas that I had in mind and more questions than anything else. Sometimes I have something more digested, I could say, but here I just have more questions than answers. And I hope, and I do think that questions are actually the key to developing ourselves. At least that's a certainty for me, and I hope it can help you. So have fun and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.